Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Here is a look at my arborvitaes, and they are getting to be of mature size. And I've done several videos already on these, and everybody keeps asking for the measurements and stuff. So here you can see they are about 2.5 feet maybe from my fence, not nearly far enough. You can kind of see the center stem of that plant right there, and it's just over 2 feet. They might be 2.5 feet, but that's about as close to measuring as I'm going to get right now because it's soaking wet outside. So I hope that satisfies people, and if you ask in the comments, I'm not going to respond because you keep asking. Anyways, you can see what they did to my neighbor's fence, and she's having a hard time mowing and was thrilled when I asked her if I could come over and trim these. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and run a straight edge down these things. And this is just a good example of what will happen if you plant smaller trees, and if you just can't wait for the privacy shrub or whatever. It's hard to wait, but before you know it, 4 or 5 or 6 years goes by and this starts happening. So you can see they're overhanging probably about 2 feet, and they're 2.5 feet away from the fence. So I would go at least 4 feet from your fence, probably about 4 feet, maybe 5 feet. So that's a pretty good judge of how you would want to space these things in all directions from each other and any fences, property lines, obstacles, houses, whatever. I would go probably 4 feet, and you could go as far as 6 or 7 feet depending upon how thick of a hedge you want and how long you want to wait. Mine are only 3 feet apart, spaced apart, and I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, it makes a real thick, dense hedge, and they seem to be doing well, and they are meshing well together, and they're living fine like that. So I'm happy with that because they were tiny when I planted them. I mean, mine were like 6 inches, little tiny baby clones. So I had to wait for several years, and then all of a sudden they just took off, and now I have this. So I would go about 4 feet at least in all directions, up to 6 feet. And it just depends on the look you want and how quickly you want them to fill in together and everything. And that brings me to another point. I have some wet areas in that fence line up near my house it's in the shade and it stays wet all the time. There's some pumps that drain up there and whatever, but it's wet. And I've had a problem with those trees taking and getting up out of the shade and out of the mud, as I mentioned in my other videos. A couple of them fell over a few times. They blew over in the wind or a snowstorm. And actually that reminds me, one time I came home from a fishing trip and some kid's kite had gotten tangled up in my bushes, and he uprooted it from yanking it trying to get his kite back. You'll see later in the video what I did for those. I used bungee cords and strapped them to my fence posts. And thankfully, those bungee cords have held up now for several years, at least 3 or 4 years, and they're still holding. When I trimmed all these bushes out of the way here in a minute later when I'm done, I exposed them again, and they're still in there, and they're still holding. But I'm also hoping that because they're 3 feet together, that maybe their roots might kind of intertwine with each other and kind of help support each other a little bit. And also the branches will kind of it's almost like they're kind of holding hands and locking together, and maybe like the wind and things, it'll help to kind of lock them in a little bit is what I'm hoping, because I looked down at the root ball and there was one of them that was kind of pulling over to the side a little bit. I mean, it wasn't completely uprooted, but you could see where the soil was disturbed and it was kind of leaning a little bit. I don't want that one to fall over and come uprooted at the root ball. I may go back out and put another support on that tree just to make sure and try. It probably would be a smart idea before we get a wind or snowstorm and it falls, because that will upset me if I lose a whole tree out of this row. So supporting them is key, but if they're in good, dry, well-drained soil and everything, that shouldn't be a problem. With my particular setup here, I have a wet spot, so they are prone to doing that. And as I also mentioned in my other videos, in the comments I think, I didn't like do anything special for these when I planted them. They were tiny little trees, and I literally took like a spade, a little hand garden shovel, a little tiny small shovel, and I just took a plug of dirt out of the ground and stuck them in the ground. I didn't do any elaborate raised beds or like digging, big 6, 8-inch, 12-inch holes and filling it with all kinds of feed and topsoil and fertilizer. I didn't do any of that. I have pretty bad soil in my yard. It's thick, kind of clay, heavy soil with rocks and boulders in it from where they graded it. And that's all I did. I just stuck them in the ground. And that's part of the reason some of those other plants fell over, was because there's a huge boulder that goes under my fence into my neighbor's yard, and one of those plants is growing right on top of it. So it's not only is it wet, but it only has about 6 or 8 inches of soil, mud, and then it hits a boulder. And I tried to get it out when the plant fell over, but it went all the way under my fence, back under into my neighbor's yard too, and I just stopped messing with it. So that plant, with support, hopefully finally the roots, they went in, got under and around that rock, and hopefully it's going to hold. I don't want to think about it. But anyways, I know this is a long story. I hope y'all are enjoying the voiceover. I mean, I'm trying to kind of tell you all about some of the things about growing them, supporting them, what I went through. But enjoy the footage of this cutting here. And I think it looks a lot better and a lot neater when I'm done. I got them out of my yard for my neighbor. She's going to be thrilled with that, and her landscaper will be able to mow. I'm sure he'll be happy, because he has a big riding lawnmower, and anyone who mows knows what it's like when you have branches hit you in the face. So now just a couple notes about a little bit more technical about what I'm doing here. I know I basically am just shaving them flat to begin with and getting them back up off the fence. And they will recover from that. They probably will even bush back in over the next 2 years, like, the rest of this year and next year. They may kind of bush back in and fill in down there. It's really dark from that fence line down. They haven't been getting any sunlight, and it's dark down there, and a lot of those branches have not had growth on them for a long time. So it's yet to be seen how much of those older branches will have new shoots on them, if any. But the existing shoots, I mean, I tried to leave some. I mean, if I saw little tiny shoots of green coming out down there, I kind of tried to leave some of them so they could have some new shoots to grow. But I also tried to take out some of those larger branches so I wouldn't be poking my neighbor or whatever, because when you cut them back that hard, you start to get into larger growth and larger branches. So there is some 3/4 inch to an inch almost branches that are sticking out now, and I tried to just trim those back into the fence line a little bit so they wouldn't be sticking out just big nasty branches that are poking into their yard. But that's basically it. I'm just knocking them straight back into a straight line with the fence as much as I can, and then taking out some of the dead or some of the leafless branches that are just kind of poking out. I go back through and trim those off with my hand shears when I'm done, and these things will bounce back from that. I don't even know what people would recommend as far as the best time of year to trim these are. They would probably say in the fall or early spring before they start growing, but they're just so hardy and they grow so fast. I trim them anytime. I mean, I just trim them when they need it, and they go into vegetative growth and they just grow. So I wouldn't worry too much about what time of year it is, especially once they're established and they're growing. I haven't had any problems with it. I trim them in the spring. This is July, and I guarantee you they will be fine. So I wouldn't worry about the time of year. Just, don't take too much off of them if they're young, and they'll be fine. Okay guys, this is the last little stretch of trimming, and just a side note, it is early morning right now. It's like 6:30 in the morning, right after the sun came up, so that's why it's a little bit dim outside, and it's overcast and it's getting ready to start raining on me. So here in about 20 seconds the bottom falls out and it just starts pouring, and I have to grab my phone and run inside and save my phone and get the camera out of the rain because I don't have a waterproof case. But I'm able to finish the video. That last little bit on the other side of the gate is all I don't get to, and I just come back out when it's raining and use my hand shears and just cut that back real quick. And then I rake it all up and throw all the debris in the woods, throw that away. You don't really need to see me raking. It's not that exciting, so we missed that part of the video. I'm sure you're not going to be too upset about it, but watch this. These raindrops are huge, and it just starts pouring down rain on me in a minute. Well, okay, so here is after the rain. Well, it's still kind of drizzling, but I went back out in the rain and finished that last couple feet, and I raked up all of the debris and got rid of it, and that's what we're left with. I mean, this video was pretty much in real time. I sped it up just a little bit, but basically we're talking, this took like 15 or 20 minutes. So not very long at all, and that trimmer I'm using does a really good job. And that looks pretty good for a 15-minute trim job there. I mean, maybe I could get it a little bit straighter and everything. If it wouldn't have started raining, I might have sat out there and groomed it a little more. But here's those bungee cords that are holding these trees up, and they're strapped to the fence posts. One day here soon, when it's not raining and everything's not soaking wet, I'm going to go out and check on those trees and kind of pull those bungee cords off and see how well that tree is doing on its own, and then I'm going to check that other tree with the root ball that was kind of pulling up and see if it needs some support. So those might be well entrenched and well rooted now, and they might not need the support anymore. However, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and leave it on. That way the support will be there just in case it needs it, and it's not strangling or girdling the tree in any ways. The bungee cord hooks are just kind of hooked around a solid branch. So it's doing a pretty good job of holding it. So there we go, guys. I've had a lot of questions about spacing trees and how far from fences and how far from each other, and I've answered the questions several different times in the comments of my videos. I put a tape measure up and showed you the spacing, and I talked about the spacing at the beginning. Here is a view of kind of what it looks like down around the root ball of these plants. You can see how they kind of have the fall needle drop, and that's what that brown is. That's from fall needle drop and just from lack of light, sunlight and everything down below that fence line where it's dark. You see what those branches look like, and you can kind of see that's 3 feet, and they're 2.5 feet from the fence. Not very far. I would probably double that if I was doing it again. So, have a nice day. I hope you enjoyed the video.